Welcome to Fat Chat. I am Annette, the founder of Fat Girls Traveling, and your host for today. I'm super excited to chat about something that feels a little taboo, and I feel like this is a safe space, and the reason why I want to bring Fat Chat back. And we're going to call this episode, Can We Skip to the Good Part? And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce my friend and co host, Kate. How are you, Kate?
Hi. It's so good to talk to you about this stuff. Just for everyone, I'm Kate McKenzie. I run a small company that's focused on climate change law, and we do research and educational type of stuff. And I'm based in Scotland.
So, what brought you to the UK, Kate?
Well, so I moved to Scotland in 2017. That was the year that President Trump was inaugurated the first time. And that had something to do with the fact that I left the United States. But also, I was at a point where I just wasn't feeling super fulfilled in my work. And I was kind of feeling itchy feet to go sort of follow my dream, really. When I first went to law school, a million years ago, I started law school in the 1900s, in 1999 specifically, so barely. So I focused on environmental law when I was in law school, but then I never worked in that field. And the last 10 years that I lived in the States, I was in California. Um, and I was working initially on lots of social justice issues. I worked with a labor union out there. I was a mediator. I did a lot of different work, but none of it um, just felt like I was having the kind of impact that I wanted to have in the world. And I wasn't working in a field like environmental law that was interesting to me. And so I really wanted to get back to focusing on environmental law or climate change specifically. I wanted to get back into working in an international setting. I grew up in Europe, and so I wanted to have that component again. And the easiest way that it seemed for me to do that was to go back to school, essentially. And so I found just a perfect program in Scotland that focused on environmental law at the international level. And it's a 1 year master's program. And I decided, you know what, I'm not fulfilled. I'm not doing what I want to do. Why not do this thing and follow my dream and do this other thing? And so that's kind of where it started. And that's kind of also where I got my what I call my life motto, which is why not? And I had my own practice and I had an established life in Oakland, but I looked around and thought, if there's not a significant sort of safety or health or financial barrier for me doing this thing that I really want to do, then legitimately, why not? Why not do it? And so I did. And I've been here ever since. I moved here in 2017 to do that master's, and then I ended up staying to do a PhD, and become really specialized in what I do. And then now I'm still here.
That's amazing and so powerful that you just said, why not? And so, how long have you been in Scotland?
So it's been just over 7 years now. And I'm working toward my 10 years, which is when I can apply for what's called indefinite leave to remain. It's basically where I no longer need to constantly updating a visa to stay here. I can stay here with no restrictions, but I have to be here on a combination of visas for 10 years because I came on a student visa and not on any kind of visa. So.
Very interesting. I'm learning more about visa stuff being based in Mexico and trying to get my residency and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I do want to share how we met because I feel like that is an important part of the conversation
Yeah,
and
it
kind of
is.
where everything started. You actually joined me recently on my Thailand tour, and it was so great to meet you. And I feel like we had a really great group, but I feel like you and I connected on a lot of different things. And one of them was this conversation. I feel like there's so many things about life that you don't really know until you get older. You know, like there's so many things that people
Yep.
tell you in life that you should be afraid of, or just different things. And one of the things that I really have not known much about and had a little fear around was menopause. And perimenopause is a phrase that a lot of my friends have been talking about recently and have been, being diagnosed with it or starting to experience symptoms. And that's something that you shared with me during the trip. That's something that we talked about. And so I'm super excited to talk about perimenopause and menopause in this conversation. But first, I want to ask you, like, what made you decide to come on the trip to Thailand?
Mm. Um, yeah, I've been a long time solo traveler. I love solo adventuring. That's the way that I explore the world, and I've done it for a really long time, and I love it. But an area of the world that I've been kind of hesitant to go explore on my own is Asia and different countries in Asia, purely because as a fat person, I'm just hesitant to go to countries where I don't speak the language, I don't understand the culture, but I know that there's a body expectation of not being quite so much in a big body. So I've always been a little hesitant to go to Thailand specifically because that's one of the places I would want to go. And I figured if I went on as a solo adventure, I'd probably like find a home base at like a resort where I can just turn off and be and have sort of a vacation and then do sort of day trips to places. But I definitely wouldn't really explore much of a country on my own without somebody who knows the culture, knows the language, etc. So it was a little bit of a fear factor for me as as a fat woman traveling to countries that are stereotypically pretty fat phobic. And so I'd been actually following you on Instagram for a few years when you first started hosting your fat camps, your summer fat camps. And I was like, oh, I wish I was still in the States so I could go to these because they're primarily in North America. And so I just started following you. And then when you announced that you were doing international trips as well, and Thailand came up, I was in a moment of, you know what? I've always wanted to go there. I wouldn't explore this country or this region in this kind of extensive kind of way on my own. And I'd never done any kind of group travel before, but it just felt right. And so I decided that I was gonna spend the money on myself and take myself on this trip and just do a thing that I always wanted to do. And I'm in this era of my life where I'm trying to recognize that I am in fact worth doing these things for. And so it was one of those moments of, you know what, I am worth having this really fun, sort of luxurious experience that I wouldn't normally do. And so that's kind of what inspired me to go on the trip was having followed you for a long time and also recognizing I'm worth it. I'm worth doing these things.
Yes, you definitely are worth it. And that is just something so powerful that all of us need to remember. And what would you say is something that was like the most fun on the trip? What was your favorite part?
Um, well, since we're calling the episode Skipping to the Good Part, I don't want to skip anything though, because it was all so great. But honestly, I think the two things that stand out to me as my favorites, one is the lasting friendships, right? Like so us and several of the other people on the trip, we're still friends. We're still talking. We're still planning to get together. And so that I think the lasting friendships that came out of that is absolutely super, super special. Aside from all the amazing stuff that we did and saw and food and all the wonderful things, I think it was and I think I mentioned it to you on like the third or fourth day. It was remembering every time I walked into a hotel room that I deserve luxury. And I think I said it to you on one of the nights where I said, I walked into the hotel room and I was like, oh, it's so fancy. I need to be careful. And then I was like, wait, no, I paid for this. I paid for luxury. I deserve the luxury that I paid for. I'm worth it. And so just that reminder was so important in the moment. because I travel so much just for work. And oftentimes it's just, whatever is convenient or whatever fits into the budget, just quick, it's just a hotel in and out. And having luxury that I deserved and that was mine, it took some time to get into that, but I think that was really, really valuable.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's something that I took away as well, just you sharing that with me a few days into the trip. Like, wow, I didn't know that we were going to be staying at such fancy places. And I reminded myself that, wait, I do deserve this. And this is
Yeah,
what I paid for. And I am worth this, you know? And that really hit me as the tour operator and, you know what I mean, your host. Yeah, especially fat people and marginalized people, we do need to remind
exactly.
ourselves that we deserve it and we're worthy of it. And I feel like that was the really huge takeaway from the conversation that we were having about perimenopause was like, I deserve to be aware of what's going on in my body and I deserve to be happy. You know what I mean? And so it was one of the days while we were in Thailand that we took a day trip and went to the beach that you brought
Yeah.
up the topic.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was I was just like, "Wait, huh?" And it was just really interesting, and like after that, we kind of just continued to speak about it, and I kind of shared different things that I had heard, and you like I would say, "Oh, something is going on," and you're like, "Oh, did you know that's one of the symptoms?" Like there's so many different symptoms, you know? So
Yeah.
I would love to kind of just have you start telling us about your perimenopause story and how you figured out that was happening and that was going on with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, and this is one of my most favorite soapboxes to stand on right now. The way that it came up was we were at a beach, and I was having the hardest time keeping my estrogen patch staying on my body. So we'll talk about exactly what I like, sort of my the hormone therapy that I'm on, um, hormone replacement therapy, which is also called HRT. Um, but so I have these little patches. They're little tiny. They're like 2 inches by 2 inches. They're clear, but they stick on my butt, essentially on my sort of hip and thigh. But it was so humid in Thailand that my body was just always a little bit wet when we were outside, and so it wasn't sticking to my body properly. And I think it was when we were at the beach, and it was the salt water and
Yes.
humidity and all the moisture. My patches were just kind of sliding off my body. So I knew that that was probably going to happen. So I had brought extra ones, but that's how you were like, what is that? I was like, oh, it's my estrogen patch. Just came off in my hand. It's all good. I have extra ones. So that's kind of what started the conversation, but it was a good opening. I like to start, I've started having these conversations about my symptoms and perimenopause and menopause in general in as many rooms as I possibly can. I like to have these conversations in rooms with men particularly. I'm trying to normalize the conversation. So I like to have that conversation with men and also really, really importantly with young women because so many of us sort of entered this phase of our life right now without having any idea what's coming at us. And so I'm on a mission to educate and a mission to talk about it really in a lot of different ways. To answer your question, um, well, I think it's maybe helpful to talk about what is perimenopause, right? So we talk about menopause, perimenopause, premenopause, postmenopause, all these different words. So
Yes.
the menopause is one day. It is the day on which you have gone for a full year without a period. That's before that, you're perimenopausal, and after that, you're postmenopausal. So, but that is just one day. It means you're done. It's been a year since you've had a cycle. That is the day that is the menopause. The perimenopause, that period of time, is the period of time leading up to that one day that you've started hormonal changes in your body leading up to that. And that can last, I don't know, 10, 15 years in extreme cases. So people often confuse premenopausal and perimenopausal. Premenopause just means you've had your first period and you haven't hit your menopause yet. Everything before that's premenopause. But perimenopause that's the way it is. Perimenopause specifically is the time period leading up to the menopause when you're starting to go through those hormonal changes. So for some women, it can be really, really early. It can, 30s, mid 30s. For most women, it tends to be sort of early to mid 40s when we start noticing it, really, right? Because we don't know when it starts until we start noticing it. For me, um,
Exactly.
I I only like looking back, I can see like symptoms that I was having that I just had no idea were connected to anything related to the menopause or to being perimenopausal. I developed eczema on my hands out of nowhere. No real changes to anything I was doing, and it was just like I thought maybe it was stress related, no idea. It's hard to figure out where it comes from. I later learned once I started educating myself on what are all the various symptoms that eczema specifically is any kind of skin, like lots of different skin conditions are connected to perimenopause. Um, I had
Wow.
weird things like I had I had frozen shoulder. That's also connected. I had weird sort of like the soles of my feet were randomly itchy. And like, well, why would you think that all these things are connected unless you're really, really educated and know what all the various symptoms are? But if you think about it, your hormones deal with everything in your body, right? They regulate all kinds of things. And so it also goes to how well your ligaments are moving and how your different how things are pushed out through your skin. So your hormones starting to change is going to start having all kinds of different impacts on your body. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know all this stuff from a medical perspective. I just know it because I've educated myself. So when I started thinking about like how like am I perimenopausal, the biggest symptom for me was I was starting to have some hot flashes, but not that much. I was having night sweats, so I would wake up with my neck being just completely drenched. Um, and I was starting to have brain fog. And that was for me the most
Mm,
disruptive symptom because a lot of my work, I do presentations, I'm talking to people. And so when I started, in the middle of a sentence, my brain would go completely blank and I'd be like, don't know what we're talking about right now, completely lost all understanding of what we're even talking about. Those kinds of things. I was like, hang on, that coincided with the first minister here in Scotland. She started talking about her own symptoms and the fact that we aren't talking about it, and especially as women as we get older, this is something that we should start talking about and normalizing. So she started normalizing that conversation.
I
And
love
I
that.
started
That's
doing some
amazing.
research. Yeah, I know. But this is why representation matters, right? In every kind of way. And now you're seeing more and more celebrities, Courtney Cox, there's a whole bunch of
I
different
saw Halle
celebrities.
Berry.
Halle
Halle
Berry has
Berry
been
was
doing a whole, yep,
diagnosed,
yeah,
but her doctor diagnosed her with like an STD at first. Did you hear
yep,
about that whole thing?
I
Her
did.
like, and she's like a celebrity with like very expensive doctors, and she was like
Mhm.
misdiagnosed with an STD, and then went to got a second opinion, and they were like, no, you're perimenopausal. And that's kind of when I heard that was when I started talking about it with other women, and they were telling me some of the symptoms that they were experiencing, and the night
Exactly.
sweats was probably one of the most common ones.
Hmm. So I think what really triggered it for me is there's a few menopause specialist doctors that I follow on Instagram now who just kind of showed up in my feed with like, did you know that these are 12 really common symptoms of perimenopause? And it was things like skin conditions and frozen shoulder and itchy soles of your feet and random electrical shocks in your body. And I was like, wait, I have like most of these symptoms. I didn't have any idea they were all connected. And so that's when, for me, I started paying attention and really sort of tracking. And then when I went to the doctor, to get help really was at the point where I was like, all right, so I'm having night sweats. It's getting, sleep disruption, sleep just gets harder as you get older. These random little symptoms like the eczema, which I had dealt with by then, and the itchy feet, like weird stuff that's not a constant. So none of my symptoms were so bad that I would be like, my life is being disrupted, except that the brain fog and traveling a lot and no longer really being able to rely on exactly when and how my periods were going to show up. I just decided that none of these symptoms are so disruptive to my life that it's an actual, like, legit problem, but also I don't have to put up with it at all. Like, why am I putting up with it? Why am I still just dealing with it rather than actually getting help? And that's when I called my doctor and was like, I'm just not willing to put up with the disruption and the not knowing and the just dealing with it when I have the option to not have to do that. And it was again a moment where I was just like, I'm freaking worth it. Why do I have to settle for being uncomfortable? Because I don't have to. Like, why do it? So no, I'm not willing to. So I went to the doctor and said, "Here's all the different things that I'm going through." And she said, "Yep, those are all connected to the perimenopause. Here are your options." And that's how that journey started for me.
I love that. And I can definitely appreciate where you're like, no, I don't have to deal with this. Like it's not life or death, but I'm uncomfortable and that's enough because I'm worth it and I deserve more.
Exactly.
But also full transparency, since you are in the UK and you do have the NHS over there, it's definitely easier for you to have access to free or affordable hair health care,
Yep.
whereas in other countries it might not be
a
the
hundred
same.
percent.
So
Yeah.
just gonna
I mean,
put that out there.
I came here from the US healthcare system. So I'm familiar. And to be fair, I was maybe this is it makes sense to talk a little bit about my experience with the healthcare system here compared to the US and also my experience in Germany where I lived for a little while. I know that was something that you were curious about. Coming from a US healthcare system where I got my healthcare and my healthcare insurance through a company that I would say does better than most others in the United States. And it's because they approach things from a preventive model. It was still expensive because it's the US healthcare system, right? And so I had to pay into health insurance. Here in the United Kingdom, as part of my visa, I pay an NHS surcharge. An NHS, for anybody who's listening and is not familiar, it's the national health system. So the health system in the United Kingdom is nationalized. And it means that with my visa, all the fees that I have to pay with my visa, there's a surcharge that I pay that is part of the healthcare system. I don't remember how much it is. It's not exorbitant. It's a few thousand for several years. And that's it. Anytime I need anything, I go to the doctor or I go to the pharmacy or I get whatever healthcare that I need. There's no like I that and that's it. I go into my doctor, I check in for my appointment, I sit in the waiting room, I see my doctor, I leave. There's never an exchange of health insurance or health kind of information because there's just no that's not a thing. There are some private, you can get private insurance and do some private healthcare here, and it is much more expensive. And that's starting, but the default is the national health system. And the way that, for me, I'm really lucky in that my entire care team is women. So that's not just my menopause care. It just happens that way. I live in a small seaside town, and I don't know if there are just more women in the health team here or not, but I'm really happy with the fact that my entire medical team is women. So when I went in, I made the appointment. I just called and I said, I want to talk to somebody about menopausal symptoms. They made me appointment. I went in. I listed my symptoms. They said, "Yep, those are all symptoms related to perimenopause." And I said, "I want to know what my options are." Like I was ready to just go, just give me a hysterectomy. Let's get it out. Let's go. I'm done. Move on. And she was like, "Well, there are less extreme options. Let's start there. Um, so
You're
I
like,
think
get it out.
I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't need it. I don't need the mess. I don't need the unpredictability of the
The
period
stress.
anymore. Like, I don't even know,
Yeah.
like it could be 10, 15 years. I don't know how long this is gonna last. Um, anyway, so we decided on my treatment plan, which was a first step, not hysterectomy. Um, but so specifically what I'm on, I'm essentially on the lowest possible doses of hormone replacement therapy that I can be on. So I also don't want a ton of disruption in my life because I'm worth having a life without disruption. And so I opted to have a copper coil inserted. So I have a progesterone coil in my cervix, and then I'll be there for until I'm 55, so 5 more years. And that just gives me, it's basically just like any kind of a birth control spiral, right? So it's implanted. It gives me a low dose of progesterone, which is necessary for anyone who has a uterus. You still need that. Um, and then I have my little estrogen patches, which are my little clear patches that I just put on. And those I switch out. I change mine on a Monday and then Thursday. You just put a fresh one on other side of your body. And that's it. And so that's all I have to do, which is great. And within about,
Hmm.
I don't know, I want to
Yeah.
say about a month, 6 weeks, the vast majority of my symptoms just dissolved and just went away. And it was incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's like almost no time. And you're on the lowest dosage. Like, wow.
I'm like basically entry level HRT.
And
And
since you did, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and to be fair, like I had super mild symptoms, and that'll change over time. But but I went early, right? And I think that's maybe where you were going just now. Since I had access and I went early and was not willing to put up with any of it, I got relief.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Just being
I agree.
proactive and yeah, just yeah, focusing on your health and kind of what you need and not being afraid to ask for the help that you need. I love
Yeah.
that. I would also want to ask, since you did kind of start talking about the medical system in Germany and the medical system in the UK versus the medical system in the US, I would love to kind of know what the difference is as far as like fat phobia and the rhetoric around weight loss, because in the US, it feels like that's always the only solution to everything. And so I'd love to kind of know what you experienced on that end.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic to talk about. My experience in the United States with any medical appointment that I had, even if it, even if I was going in for flu symptoms or you going in for like, a scrape on your hand or whatever, there's always also you still get your weight taken, you still like that's standard for every medical appointment, and it's not relevant to why you're there most of the time, right? And so that was one of the most significant differences that I noticed here is that I think it has only been like once or twice, maybe for an annual appointment, where it's automatic that I am asked to step on a scale. When I went in for my menopause related things or anything else, they don't, you don't step on the scale. It's not relevant to the appointment, right? So that just the entry point there, I think is different. The focus in the US healthcare system when you're a fat person and you go to any kind of a medical appointment, the very first thing that is it's all weight centric, right? Even as you're getting older and it's like, well, maybe, mobility and activity and stuff. Here it's more a focus on, are you activity level, your strength, your mobility, rather than, well, you need to lose weight, right? So that is one major difference here. My medical care is about treating what is the actual issue, not treating what is seen as the issue, which is my weight. So that's
Wow.
been a significant difference here. That is only my experience, right? There's still plenty of fat phobia in the UK. It's just as a healthcare system and as a healthcare system consumer, just the entry into the appointment is different, right? So that's one difference. The difference to the German system, so I grew up in Germany. So I was a kid in Germany and experienced as a child, and then as an adult when I was in the process of moving there at one point as well. So as an adult, I didn't have that much experience with the healthcare system itself because I never needed care. The where I encountered, I wasn't there long enough to need care. So, but where I encountered the healthcare system and its fat phobia was just signing up for health insurance. And in the German system has shifted more in the direction of the US system where there's a lot of private insurance companies. There is still a state sort of government insurance, but the private is, considered to be better quality and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of the default is you try to get on the private if you can. I had no underlying health conditions, nothing, no medical issues at all. I wear glasses. So I got kicked out and was not eligible for private insurance purely based on my BMI. 100% purely based on my weight. And so that was my initial experience with the German healthcare system, and that was with the insurance. I then, when I left and came back to Scotland, I was in the process of getting to seen by a doctor who would vouch for my health essentially to get on the private insurance, to give an exception on the BMI. But I had to be, I had somebody who knew somebody who was a fat person who, right? Like it was the system itself
Wow. That's
purely
crazy.
barred me on my BMI. So, and as a child, growing up as a child in Germany, as a fat child, I definitely experienced a lot of fat phobia in the healthcare system, in the medical care in Germany as a fat child, for sure. Um, I was not a child in the UK, so I don't know what it was like at once upon a time, but now my personal experience here in the United Kingdom is far less fat phobic than anywhere else I've lived in the medical field.
That's amazing. And that's so important. And it's really empowering. And it definitely reminded me like, I broke my arm last year and went back to the States to go get some care. And like in the waiting room, before they even talk to you, they have a scale right there in the waiting room. Like you fill out the
How
paperwork,
is that
then
relevant to a broken arm?
I know. Like I needed a cast. They didn't need, you know what I mean? I like broke my elbow, but it was very strange. As soon as I walked into the waiting room, they weighed me.
Yeah.
And then that had nothing to do with my broken elbow, but
No.
I knew my weight and I don't have a scale in my home. So I don't weigh myself. And so it's one of those things where I did learn that I can decline being weighed if I can tell them, like, hey, this has no bearing on what I'm here for. So I'd rather not be weighed. And
Yeah,
unless
but that
it's
puts it
like
on you.
essential, exactly, that puts the onus on me to have to like advocate for myself. But like, luckily, with these conversations and through fat camps and meeting fat health advisors and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I have learned that and have wanted to empower and have in other conversations like this the community to know that like you can say no thanks, and I didn't say no thanks at that point. I just stepped on backwards, which you can also do.
Mhm.
And then I sat down and had my consultation. But when you said that, I was like, whoa. As soon as it used to be before, like you would go past the door into the doctor's office and they weigh you.
It's
Nah,
part of the intake procedure.
absolutely. It's right when you sign in and get weighed right there in front of
Yeah.
everyone. It's very interesting. So, which symptoms made you wish that you could skip to the good part? Like, which ones would you say were the most difficult to deal with?
I think the most annoying was the brain fog and the losing words. I'm bilingual. I grew up in Germany, like I mentioned, and so um, I'm used to if a word just doesn't come, then it'll come in another language. It'll be fine and I can translate it. But it was not coming at all anymore. Just the words were just like I'd have like just moments of either not knowing what I was talking about, which is just really weird, or just not being able to grasp the word that you're looking for. And everybody knows that feeling of, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, just can't grasp it. But it was like, I legitimately don't know this word. It was really weird. That, and so that was really, really annoying. Hot flashes a little bit, but really only when they happened in a moment of like I'm about to like introduce a bunch of speakers and suddenly I'm like I can't hardly think because I feel like I'm in the depths of of an inferno. Like that was annoying. Um, but as far as disruption, yeah, as far as disruption goes, I think the brain fog and the just not being able to know when and how heavy my period was going to show up as somebody who travels frequently. And so and traveling frequently for work and just, being on the road a lot, not being able to plan for that because it was just starting to get erratic. And so it takes a long time for you for your period actually to cease completely, but it starts getting super erratic. And for somebody who for a lot of years was able to rely on my cycle to actually know, all right, so it's always relatively expected when it comes, and it's pretty much been relatively heavy with lots of cramping for most of all of my adult life. So I can, you plan around that. You know how your body, you know how to plan for your periods when you're somebody who travels regularly. But when I no longer able to plan for it, and sometimes it would, be like, "Oh, I guess I just had my period." And other times it would be like, "Oh, I just had all of the periods at the same time." Like like flood like all the and so it had become erratic, and that was as far as just being able to live my life. The disruption is what really ultimately prompted me to actually say, I definitely need medical intervention. And that's why went straight to like, cut it out. I don't need it anymore. I just don't want my periods anymore. And then of course my doctor talked me down. And so that's why that was really what triggered it for me, was just that, just not being able to plan and just the absolute disruption of that period.
Yeah, and I feel like that must also have some impact on your mental health as well. Just kind of like, you know, not knowing what's going to happen, what's going on with your body.
Yeah. Um, and that is, I luckily did not have extreme symptoms when it comes to any kind of mental health, but one of the most significant and dangerous symptoms related to perimenopause is depression. And this is where I often talk to people about the fact that perimenopause and the lack of knowledge and understanding in the medical expertise. I mean, it's not menopause and perimenopause and everything related to it is not really part of medical school curriculum in the Western world. It's just is a huge care gap in healthcare as well. So when women do have more extreme versions and symptoms that are especially connected to mental health, depression, and anxiety, if it's not being diagnosed as hormone related and menopause, specifically menopause related, then it's not being treated appropriately. And women are dying. Right. So the largest group of women who die by suicide are women who are of perimenopausal age. Now, we don't have enough research because we don't have enough research into women's health and women's bodies and women's reproductive health yet to really know that that is actually what's driving it. But the age and the numbers don't lie, right? And I, again, was lucky that I didn't have super severe symptoms, but I have had days where I've been actually feeling perfectly fine, but I just can't stop crying. And I don't know why. And that has also gone away with my HRT. But that to me is one of the most dangerous care gaps in healthcare, when women are being treated for all kinds of things that have similar or same symptoms, but they're not actually being, because they're not being tested for or talked to about, and there's a lack of understanding in the medical community about all of the various symptoms. There are hundreds of symptoms um, that women are being misdiagnosed and mistreated, misdiagnosed and not given the correct prescriptions and treatments for a variety of things, and that's
Mm.
really, really dangerous for women.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about that. And that's so true that just not having access to the medical care that you need to get the
Yep.
diagnosis,
Hmm.
that's deadly. And I didn't even look at it that way. And
Yep.
that's so powerful, because for so many years, it feels like this has been like a secret conversation that women either have just in like women's circles or they don't have at all. I remember it being called the change,
Hmm.
and like the
Yep.
most that I knew about it was hot flashes. So when people started talking to me about night sweats and headaches or migraines or all these different things, and I'm like, wait, huh? People of all ages have migraines and people of all ages have night sweats.
Yep.
Like, is this something I need to be more aware of? And it definitely felt like the more that I learned about it, the more aware that I needed to be, because like as you mentioned, there's so little research done on these issues
Yep.
that are happening to women. And I know
Exactly.
even go ahead.
No, I was agreeing. Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
And these conversations, it feels like we're in a moment where they're happening more, right? Where celebrities like Halle Berry and Courtney Cox and various other people are actively sort of talking about it and normalizing the conversation. But it didn't used to be that way. And I'm like, why didn't the older generation, why didn't my mother tell me to expect this? Didn't she tell me this was coming? Why didn't older women prepare me? And I think that's where this idea of it being a real taboo comes from, right? Like we just used to just deal with it because there's nothing you can do about it. So you might as well just go through it, and everybody does it and everybody goes through it and you just deal with it. And I suppose for like the severity of my symptoms, that would totally be, it would be doable, but it's not necessary, right? We don't have to suffer anymore. There is intervention. We have to know how to ask for it. We have to know where we can get it. And it's outrageous that it's not something that is part of medical school curriculum, that it's just generically understood and known that there are all these, hundreds of different symptoms that are connected when you look at them. Um, yeah, I think we're starting to be in an era where more women are having the conversation out loud and openly and breaking that generational taboo of it's just not something that you talk about.
And the truth is, like, the more I learn about not just perimenopause, but menopause, it's something that I actually am looking forward to. It feels
Mm,
like it's a sense of freedom that you get when like your whole thinking process is not like managed by hormones or expectations and all of these different things. Like you've mentioned some of the resources that you follow, and I've shared with you some resources that my friends have sent me. And the takeaway that I am getting is not only like I'm worth it and I deserve it, but also it's not this horrible thing that I've been told that it is. And maybe it's because the people that have always told me about it were men that don't experience it,
hmm.
because
Well,
women have not talked to me about it to this point. And that also reminded me of like, after this conversation with you, I want to have a conversation with my mom about it. Like, why has she not ever brought it up to me? And it
yeah.
is because there's just this kind of like generational silence, as you mentioned, that generationally it's just unacceptable to talk about those things. But how are we supposed to know as women if the women before us aren't telling us what to expect?
I actually asked my mom that same question and was just like outraged. So why didn't you tell me? And her response was, well, you just got on with it. Wasn't that big of a deal. Now, maybe her symptoms weren't so super severe, but that also just reinforces this idea of, well, you just get on with it, right? Like everybody goes through it and you just get on with it. But it can be really, really terrible. It can be awful. Some women experience such severe symptoms that it like the depression, the anxiety, people talk about changes in personality, right? All of those things can be really, really severe and traumatic. And some people really, really, really truly suffer. And knowing that there is medical intervention out there and it's actually your hormones that are messing everything up and you can get treatment is so important. But I agree, right? There is good stuff. There's a liberation that I think happens of women in sort of the second, or the third sort of third of our life, the final third of our life, which is we're no longer here to make or care for babies, right? That function's gone. Now we are here to share our wisdom. And there's a
Yes.
liberation that kind of happens, and it's age, but it's also, I think, hormonal, where one of the things that I've experienced is my patience for BS gone. No longer am I putting up with your silliness. Nope. I do not have time for that. So that like that and that is a symptom of being perimenopausal, just the lack of patience and the just, you know, can I swear on this? Men. Okay,
Absolutely.
good. Good. I just don't have menopause left to give, is what it comes down to, right? And there's again, it's partially age related, but I do think it's hormonal as well. This, like, laying down the burden of societal and biological expectation of reproducing, right? There are only a few large species that go through the menopause that we know of so far. And they're large mammal species often. And it is often in species that have a long life expectancy like we do. And really it is a period of time where the knowledge has to be passed on, right? The guidance has to be passed on. And women are the holders of information and knowledge and all of that. And so we now have this entire period of our lives where we can't bear children anymore. So we are freed up biologically to focus on the other piece of our lives, which is being the keepers of knowledge and the sharers of knowledge and making sure that information is passed along. And now we're finally freed up to also have part of that information being, what can you do to go into this time in your life with less severe struggle, because we don't have to anymore.
Why not find a way to
Why not?
minimize the burden, you
Because
know?
you're worth it.
You're worth it and you deserve to live a life that's burden free. You deserve to live a life where you can go to a medical professional and they can help you manage what's going on with your health without everything being dwindled down to your weight, you
Yep,
know? And
exactly.
so
Exactly.
I really appreciate your time and this conversation. I also want to have another conversation with you because you mentioned going back to get your master's and
Yep.
and some of the stories you told me in Thailand about that period,
Yeah.
girl, they're lit. And so we'll definitely have another conversation about this because that was super inspiring as well. But I just felt like this is such an important conversation and it's something that feels so taboo. And so this is the perfect space where we can talk about it and help educate other fat women and other fat people with uteruses, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
uh, to advocate for themselves in the medical space. And
Mhm.
Luckily, some of the resources that you enjoy and that you find helpful, you've sent me those over. So I've created a blog post, which I will link in this video for anyone
Oh,
who is
perfect.
interested.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in finding more resources or people to follow that you can learn from on this topic, please head to that blog post. But thank you again, Kate, so much for spending your time with me and having a fat chat. This was so informative. And I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for inviting me and for making space to have this conversation in a public forum. I think you're right. It's so important to have these conversations. And we're luckily now starting to have them more and more. But if I can, I don't want any woman who is younger than me to walk into this period unaware. Then like that's my new mission in life, is to make sure that if I can, you know, talk about it enough that it eases the path for somebody coming up behind me, then that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that because I am turning 40 this year and I am going to be way more aware starting back when we were in Thailand, just being more aware of the symptoms and what's going on
Good.
with my body, just because of the conversations that we're having. And so hopefully this conversation will help other people learn more, appreciate themselves more, and ask themselves why not, push forward, do things that they want to do, and remind them that they're worth, taking the time for themselves and they're worth figuring out what's going on with their body if
Yeah.
something is going on, and it's worth multiple conversations and second opinions or whatever it needs to be so that you can really know what's going on with you.
Yep. So you can skip to the good stuff happily.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This was such a good part and I love you and have a great day. Thank you so much,
You
Kate.
too. Mwah.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.